The tension in the cabin was palpable, a simmering undercurrent beneath the polished veneer of luxury air travel. At 40,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean, aboard a gleaming Gulfstream G650, two worlds were about to collide with devastating force. Cheryl Martin's face contorted with rage as she towered over the seated woman. "I've had enough of your attitude," she hissed, her voice barely audible above the jet engine's hum. What happened next shocked everyone on board and changed her life forever before the wheels even left the ground. Before we start the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. Before anyone could react, Cheryl's hand connected with Ebony Dane's cheek. The sound of the slap reverberated through the cabin like a gunshot. Time seemed to freeze. Mark, the senior flight attendant, stood paralyzed, his mouth agape in horror. Dr. Natalie Brown gasped, her hand flying to cover her mouth. Camille, Ebony's personal assistant, dropped her tablet with a clatter. Ebony touched her stinging cheek, her expression a mixture of shock and something deeper, a weary recognition. This was not the first time her identity had been questioned, her presence challenged, but never had it escalated to physical violence, and certainly not on her own aircraft. "Get this woman away from me," Ebony said, her voice quiet but commanding. "And contact our aviation management company immediately." Mark rushed forward, gently pulling Cheryl back as she continued her tirade. "You don't belong here," Cheryl spat. "I don't care what lies you've told these people. I know an imposter when I see one." Only then did Greg Brown, Natalie's husband, step in. "Ms. Martin, do you have any idea who this woman is?" Cheryl scoffed. "Some charity case pretending to be important." "This is Ebony Dane," Greg said slowly, "founder of Moby Bank Financial Services, owner of this Gulfstream G650, and your employer." The color drained from Cheryl's face as the reality of her situation dawned on her. She looked around wildly, seeing the truth reflected in every face. Her eyes returned to Ebony, who now stood, straightening her simple navy suit with dignified composure. "This is my aircraft," Ebony stated, her voice steady despite the red mark blooming on her cheek. "And you have just assaulted its owner." The conflict had been brewing since Atlanta. From the moment Ebony boarded her own plane that crisp October morning, Cheryl had viewed her with suspicion and barely concealed disdain. Where Cheryl expected ostentation, Ebony offered understatement, her modest attire and unassuming demeanor hiding the fact that she was worth billions. The initial confrontation over a boarding pass had merely been the first indication of trouble. Mark's hasty explanation that Ebony was the principal had momentarily checked Cheryl's behavior, but not her underlying prejudice. That festered throughout the flight to Los Angeles, growing more pronounced with each passing hour. By the time they reached the Pacific, crossing the international dateline en route to Tokyo, Cheryl's hostility had infected the atmosphere of the entire cabin. Her passive-aggressive comments, pointed glares, and dismissive tone created an unmistakable aura of tension. The incident with the water glass during turbulence had only escalated matters. Cheryl's accusation that Ebony should be more careful with her laptop when Cheryl herself had bumped it revealed a woman determined to find fault. For Ebony, it was an all-too-familiar pattern. Despite her incredible success, transforming her innovative financial technology startup into a global enterprise worth billions by age 35, she still encountered those who couldn't reconcile her race with her wealth. "Keep your head up, baby girl," her father had always told her. "The world sees your skin before it sees your heart, but let them see your heart after all." It was this philosophy that had guided Ebony's response to Cheryl's increasingly hostile behavior. Rather than immediate confrontation, she chose restraint, focusing instead on the high-stakes meetings awaiting her in Tokyo and Dubai, where she hoped to secure support for sustainable housing projects in under-resourced regions. But restraint had its limits. The breaking point came 9 hours into their Pacific crossing. Ebony had requested a cup of chamomile tea, hoping to ease the headache that had developed, a physical manifestation of the stress Cheryl's behavior had induced. When Cheryl delivered the tea, she placed it carelessly on Ebony's tray, splashing hot liquid onto the financial documents spread before her. "I'm sorry," Ebony said automatically, reaching for napkins. Something in Cheryl's snapped. You're sorry? You've been demanding special treatment since Atlanta, acting like you own the place. I do own this aircraft, Ebony interjected quietly. Right, Cheryl scoffed. And I'm the Queen of England. The conversation deteriorated rapidly from there. Cheryl, emboldened by what she perceived as Ebony's meekness, unleashed a torrent of accusations that Ebony was an imposter, that she had somehow manipulated her way onto this flight, that she was probably just staff trying to take advantage. When Natalie attempted to intervene, Cheryl dismissed her too. You're all in on it, aren't you? Playing some kind of game. Ms. Martin, Mark tried again, his voice strained with panic. Please, you need to stop. But Cheryl was beyond reason. Months of personal frustrations, career disappointments, and deeply ingrained biases coalesced into a perfect storm of rage. And Ebony Dane, with her quiet dignity and unassuming presence, became the target. The slap that followed silenced the cabin. In the aftermath, as Mark restrained Cheryl in the rear galley and Camille made urgent calls to the aviation management company, Ebony sat alone by the window. The Pacific stretched endlessly below, its vastness a stark contrast to the confined drama playing out in the cabin. Are you okay? Natalie asked, settling into the seat beside her. We should document that mark on your face. Press charges when we land. Ebony touched her cheek again. It will fade. But what she did will have consequences, Ebony finished. Just not the kind you might expect. Ebony's mind was already working beyond the immediate crisis. She thought of Cheryl's personnel file, which she would review upon landing. She thought of the aviation management company that had hired her without proper vetting. She thought of all the subtle and not-so-subtle biases that had allowed this situation to develop. Most of all, she thought of her father, who had driven countless passengers across Atlanta in his taxi, enduring slights and insults with the same quiet dignity she now struggled to maintain. What will you do? Natalie pressed. Ebony turned from the window. I'll do what I've always done. Use this as an opportunity for change. By the time they began their descent into Tokyo, Ebony had drafted a new company policy on her laptop, one that would require all staff working on her aircraft to undergo bias training. She had composed an email to the aviation management company, not demanding Cheryl's termination, but requiring a complete overhaul of their hiring and training practices. And she had made a decision about Cheryl herself. The Tokyo landing was smooth, the handover to local authorities less so. Japanese police boarded the aircraft at Ebony's request, but not to arrest Cheryl. Instead, they escorted the now subdued flight attendant to a private room where Ebony had arranged for a translator to be present. You hit me because you couldn't see past your preconceptions, Ebony told Cheryl, who sat rigid with fear and shame. You couldn't imagine someone who looks like me owning something like this plane. Cheryl's eyes remained fixed on the floor. I could press charges, Ebony continued. I could ensure you never work in aviation again. But that solves nothing except my desire for retribution. Only then did Cheryl look up, confusion replacing fear in her eyes. Instead, I'm offering you a choice. You can walk away from this incident with a severance package and a non-disclosure agreement. Or you can participate in a program I'm developing, a 6-month immersion in our corporate culture, working directly with our community outreach teams in Atlanta. Why? Cheryl asked, her voice barely audible. Because firing you changes nothing. But education might change everything. Ebony stood, smoothing her navy suit once more. You have until we depart for Dubai to decide. In the meantime, you'll remain here in Tokyo at company expense. As Ebony turned to leave, Cheryl finally found her voice. I don't understand. After what I did. My father was a taxi driver in Atlanta, Ebony said, pausing at the door. He taught me that the world sees your skin before it sees your heart. But he also taught me that true change comes not from punishment, but from understanding. The incident aboard the Gulfstream G650 never made headlines. There was no viral video, no social media outrage. But within Ebony's organization, it sparked a transformation. The aviation management company overhauled its hiring practices. New training protocols were implemented across Ebony's enterprises, and Cheryl Martin, who chose the 6-month program over severance, eventually became one of the most vocal advocates for the bias training initiative. As for Ebony Dane, she secured her sustainable housing deal in Dubai, expanded her educational initiatives in Tokyo, and continued to build her business empire with the same quiet determination that had characterized her rise from that modest Atlanta neighborhood. But she never forgot the sting of that slap at 40,000 feet. A painful reminder that no amount of wealth could insulate her from the prejudices that still permeated society. It became another chapter in her story, another lesson to share when mentoring young entrepreneurs from backgrounds similar to her own. Success doesn't shield you from discrimination, she would tell them, but it does give you the power to respond to it in ways that create lasting change. In the end, the incident that began with violence became a catalyst for transformation, proof that even at 40,000 feet, with the world literally beneath her, Ebony Dane remained grounded in the values her parents had instilled in her: dignity, compassion, and the unwavering belief that education could bridge even the widest divides. 6 months after the Tokyo incident, Ebony found herself back in Atlanta, standing in the light-filled atrium of the MobiBank headquarters. The building, a masterpiece of sustainable architecture with its living walls and solar glass, had become a landmark in the city's evolving skyline. Yet for all its grandeur, Ebony had insisted on accessibility. The ground floor housed a community financial center where residents from her old neighborhood could access banking services, educational resources, and entrepreneurship coaching. Today, however, Ebony wasn't focused on the building or its services. Her attention was fixed on the woman walking tentatively through the main entrance, Cheryl Martin. "Ms. Dane," Cheryl said, extending her hand with newfound respect. "Thank you for meeting me personally." Ebony accepted the handshake. "How was your final week with the community outreach team?" Cheryl's 6-month immersion program had placed her in the heart of Ebony's philanthropic operations, working with families in underprivileged communities, assisting with financial literacy workshops, and witnessing firsthand the impact of systemic inequity. "Transformative," Cheryl answered, her voice steady but humbled. "I never understood before. I never wanted to understand." Ebony nodded, recognizing the sincerity in Cheryl's words. "Walk with me," she said, guiding Cheryl toward a private elevator. As they ascended to the executive floor, Cheryl broke the silence. "I've been thinking about what happens next. The program ends today and I have options," Ebony finished for her. "My HR team tells me you've shown exceptional organizational skills and a genuine commitment to learning." The elevator doors opened onto a corridor lined with photographs, not of Ebony with celebrities or politicians, but of community events, groundbreaking ceremonies for housing projects, and children in newly built schools. "Is this your trophy wall?" Cheryl asked, studying the images. "These are reminders of why I built all this," Ebony corrected gently. "Not for recognition, but for impact." They entered Ebony's office, spacious but notably less ostentatious than Cheryl had expected. Instead of the gleaming monument to wealth she had imagined, the space felt warm and purposeful. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of Atlanta, including the neighborhood where Ebony had grown up. Camille was waiting inside, along with a man Cheryl recognized as the company's director of human resources. "We've prepared several options for Ms. Martin's transition," the HR director began, but Ebony raised a hand to pause him. "Before we discuss that, I'd like to hear from Cheryl," Ebony said, settling into a chair and gesturing for Cheryl to do the same. "What have you learned these past 6 months?" Cheryl took a deep breath. "I've learned that I carried assumptions so deeply embedded. I didn't recognize them as prejudice. I thought I was above that, working in luxury aviation, serving wealthy clients from diverse backgrounds." She paused. "But when I saw you board that plane in Atlanta, dressed simply without an entourage, I made instant judgments about who you were and where you belonged." Ebony remained silent, allowing Cheryl to continue. "Working in those communities, seeing the barriers people face every day just to access basic financial services, services your company is trying to make universal. I began to understand my own privilege. And my own ignorance. Cheryl's voice caught. The day I wasn't just reacting to you as an individual. I was reacting to a lifetime of assumptions about who deserves wealth and power in this world. The office fell silent. Even Camille, who had been initially skeptical about Ebony's decision to offer Cheryl rehabilitation rather than retribution, seemed moved. "Thank you for your honesty," Ebony said finally. "Now, about your future. I don't expect to continue working for your organization," Cheryl interjected. "What I did was unforgivable. I've prepared a formal letter of apology for your records, and I understand if you need me to sign additional legal documents before I leave." Ebony exchanged a glance with the HR director, who nodded slightly. "Actually," Ebony said, "we've been impressed by your progress reports. The outreach team speaks highly of your organizational abilities and your willingness to learn. They believe, and I agree, that you could be an asset to our diversity and inclusion training program." Cheryl stared in disbelief. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a chance to transform your experience into something constructive," Ebony clarified. "Your perspective, as someone who has confronted her own biases and grown from that confrontation, could be valuable in our corporate training modules." Cheryl's eyes welled with tears. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll continue the work you've started," Ebony replied simply. "Not for me, but for yourself and for others who might benefit from your journey."